Hey y'all, it's me, Tiffany, and welcome back to my channel. So, I'm here with my little boy Odin in his little chair that's like literally always by my desk. And I am going to update you on basically what I have read for the first half of the year. So, the way I'm going to be doing this is I am going to be using Tier Maker, but I'm not going to really be ranking like my favorite books in order. I'm just going to be using tier makers so I can kind of display them on the screen and just use the tiers for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 stars. But so I guess in a way that's kind of ranking, but the books within the same star number are going to be in just whatever order. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. And when it comes to book series, I'm only going to have like one photo a book series. So there's not a billion photos like I read 10 volumes of one manga, so I'm just going to use one photo for that. And I'm going to separate them by like the type of book within this. So I'm going to definitely have timestamps. And I'm also going to touch on the 21 books I want to read in 2021. I'm going to share which one of those I have read and which I haven't read yet. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this and let's get into it. Okay, so I want to start off with like more like traditional novels, but I did read one play, one poetry book. I read two books in verse, and then I read two short stories, and then I've read two children's books. And I also read like a story and lessons book and a philosophy book. So I kind of threw them here, even though that may not be super traditional, but there's not enough of them to really make their own category. Even if I put them together, I wouldn't know what to do. So basically it's going to be this, and then I'm going to do like manga and graphic novels. So let's get into it. So as I said, I'm just using Tier Maker basically to separate them. I kind of want to do the ones I read in January first, just because that's the only wrap up I have done on my channel. So if you want to hear like a little bit more spoiler-free thoughts on these next 5 books, I will definitely link the video that they're mentioned in below, just because I don't feel like repeating myself heavily. So the first book I read of this year was Strange Weather in Tokyo, and I gave that a 4 stars. Reflecting on that, I still think that is accurate. I thought this novel was cute. It's a Japanese contemporary novel, and it's like a May-December romance, so our main character has a slow burn with a former teacher who is a lot older than her, but she's still like in her 30s. And I never realized I haven't read too many books of people that are like over 20 something. So that was kind of neat, and it's quirky, it's cute, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. So the next one was my first 5-star of the year. It's the second book I read. Concrete Rose. This is supposed to be before The Hate You Give. This is about basically a teen becoming a father and navigating through that and navigating his relationship with his mother. And you know bits and pieces if you read The Hate You Give. This is just like backstory. But I never thought about it until this book came out that we don't discuss single fathers very often in media, especially young teen fathers, and he was basically the sole caregiver, and we just don't talk about that enough. And the relationship with his mom is precious. His mom is realistic, honest, but you can still tell she truly cares about her son, and she makes him take responsibility, but she's still involved. And This novel is just great. It's a different point of view of stories or it's like a different perspective, you know? We don't really get a lot of stories like that. So, Angie Thomas, I've read like the 3 books she has came out with. They're all phenomenal. So, she has become an instant buyer for me. So, if she ever releases another book, it's going to be like instantly pre-ordered because she has not let me down at all. So the next one is The Great Hunt. I'll say that is a 3-star. I read the first book to The Wheel of Time, and this one's several months apart, probably about 5 or 6 months apart, and that's not on purpose. I am renting these by audiobook from the Libby app for my library, and they just have long waiting lists, and besides having a long waiting list, my particular library lets you have 3 weeks instead of 2. Like my old library only did 2 weeks. So it takes even longer. And I'm still on hold for the 3rd book. Somehow the 4th book keeps becoming available to me, but not the 3rd. So I think I got a couple of months left. Unless I just really decide to just go ahead and buy it like on Audible, because it is taking me a while to get through this. And this is a 14-book series, and I thought this was okay. The first book started off kind of strong and then it went really weak. And this one was consistently like decent. Like it still wasn't my favorite book that I've read, especially in fantasy. But the fact that it kept like just a consistent flow and it was just, you know what I mean? It just flowed better. So I'm definitely going to check out the 3rd book. Alright, so the next one I read was Raisin in the Sun, and I shall give this a 4-star. This was a reread for me. I read this in high school, and I liked it. We saw the movie, too, that came out for this, like, I don't know when it came out, but it's a little bit of an older movie. And this is basically like a family in Chicago, and they come into some money, and basically they're trying to figure out how it should be spent, even though it's honestly one person's decision. You know, the whole family's got to put their input. And this is a short play, but it really like discusses like family dynamics, racial tensions, the American dream. It's an incredible play, and I definitely like enjoyed it more as an adult and actually having like understanding like more context behind the play. I've definitely appreciated it more, and it's a classic for a reason. Alright, so the last book I read in January was Super Fake Love Song. I'll give this a 3 as well. As I mentioned in the wrap-up, that this wasn't a bad book. It's just I felt like it should have been shorter and more to the point, because while there is some like unique perspectives to this novel, it's basically about a boy pretending to be in a band to win the affection of a girl. And I've seen this in like 90s sitcoms several times. Not necessarily like in this way, because the 90s was like 20 years ago, but it was fine. I just felt like it was too long for the premise. Like the characters were fine, but they should have been fleshed out more for the length of this novel. I don't know if it's just like a personal taste or what, but I think this would do cuter as like a movie than it was a novel. So I don't know. That was just me. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about was the one poetry book that I read, and that was Homebodies by Rupi Kaur. I'll give this a 4-star. I know a lot of people like discuss whether Insta poetry is like real poetry or not. I'm not here to tell you what to like or dislike. If you like more like traditional poetry, or you like more Instagram, like short, straight to the point, simple poetry, that's on you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I like both. I'll be honest, with Rupi Kaur, I like The Sun and Her Flowers. but I did not like Milk and Honey that much, and Homebody was definitely better than Milk and Honey. But I'd say it was about the same as The Sun and Her Flowers. I don't know if it's just the way I relate to her poetry or she just got better, because Milk and Honey was her first poetry collection. It is simple, it's kind of straight to the point, and she does do her own drawings, and there are some like analogies and stuff, but it is more simple poetry, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if you like that kind of poetry, or if you're new to poetry, I think like the simple Insta poetry is like a great way to get into poetry. But I'm not going to argue with people whether it's real or not. I see that stuff all the time, like on Reddit and stuff, and just, even if it is more like a stream of consciousness, maybe, just let people publish what they want to publish and enjoy what they want to enjoy. So the next is Heart in Atlantis. I'm going to have to give this a 2-star. Stephen King is a very hit or miss author for me. I think I've read about 20 books of his now. And it's like, I usually either really love them or I just don't care. This had like 5 stories in it, and the first one was like half the book. And then the rest just kept getting shorter and shorter. They were like all about like basically evolving like right before Vietnam, the after effects, you know. It's like all based around that, like the Vietnam War. And some reason they're like longest to shortest. I didn't like the differentiating of or how drastically different the length of these stories are. Like, they don't have to be the exact same length, but when I read stuff that's like when it has like different novellas in like one book, or it's an anthology collection, I like them to be similarly length. The first story was the only one I liked. I actually cared about the characters. Everything felt like fleshed out great, and the other ones just kind of felt like an afterthought. And that's just my opinion. And that's why I have to give it a 2-star. Like, if the first story was absolutely by itself, it'd probably be a 4-star. Like, it's not my favorite King. Whatever. So, the Black Flamingo got a 4-star. So this is a book in verse. Most books in verses that weren't just like straight up poetry collection, like, but like stuff like Ellen Hopkins. She's like the only person I really read. Ellen Hopkins has been one of my favorite authors since I was like 13. And I just didn't really know that there was a lot of more authors that do write in verse. So I'm trying to get more into that, since that's definitely like a thing I enjoy. So Black Flamingo is about this boy coming out, growing up, and dealing with his identity as gay, as being mixed, how to deal with his culture. He lives in London, but he's half Jamaican and half Greek, Cypriot. I think, like, the people from Cyprus, I think it's Cypriot. He struggles from being like a teenager and going through college and just dealing with everything. If that's like your jam, this is a great book to read. And it's definitely unique, and it's even in its own category, and I appreciate that a lot. So the next one is the other book I read in verse this year, and it was bad. Oh, it was bad. So, Ronit and Jamil, I hope I said those names right, but it's basically like a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and one is Israeli and one is Palestinian. I put 2 stars on Goodreads, but reflecting on it, it should definitely be a 1-star. I think I was just feeling nice when when you write 2 different points of view, especially in verse, you gotta make the characters sound different and unique, and even though it had their names on the top, it was hard to tell who was who, and they were just, their voices sound too much the same. Nothing was really fleshed out. And I mean, I know it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, so the romance is going to be rushed, but I just don't think this was it. If you want to read something that I had read last year that has to do with a Palestinian and an Israeli character, this novel that I picked up from the library just on whim called We Just Want to Live Here, a Palestinian teenager and Israeli teenager, an unlikely friendship. This is nonfiction. This is based on letters between the two teenagers, so this is not a romance, and this doesn't romanticize the situation, but it's interesting because they met each other going on a trip, and they kept in touch, and they do have two different points of views, which isn't surprising, but they're willing to kind of listen to each other and talk things through. And yeah, like, these are letters of teenagers, so it may not be the most in-depth or, thing you can read about the conflict, but it gives you 2 points of views of two teenagers who are willing to actually learn and care from each other. And yeah, so I definitely recommend this, but if you know nothing about the conflict, I don't think that this would be the best book to start off with, but it does have a timeline in the back of the book of the different issues between Palestine and Israel. But if you are starting to learn about that, especially with the things happening in Palestine right now, this might be a great companion book. It is short, along with your learning. So I will say that. I know that's not a book for this year, but I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so the next one is Virgins. I will give this a 4-star. This is a novella from the Outlander series. I read the first 4 books of the Outlander series, and then last year I read none because The Drums of Autumn took me like months to read because the first half of the book was horrible and then it got good in the second half. So I do want to continue it because I love the first book. I absolutely love the third book. The second and the fourth book are the ones I struggle with. The second one was horrible. The fourth one was horrible for the first half. And since it's been like over a year since I've been in the Outlander universe, I kind of wanted to read this one because this takes place with Jamie before the first book even occurred. So I don't have to worry about accidental spoilers or anything. And the 5th book in the Outlander series is over 1,000 pages, so I wanted to get my feet wet with this novella before I read The Fiery Cross. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do is The Stars Between the Sun and the Moon, and I will give this a 5-star. This is a woman telling her story about how she fled North Korea. I don't want to get too deep into the story because you just got to experience the book. It is heartbreaking. It is mortifying. It's just awful. And I did see some reviews on Goodreads after I read this complaining about the ending. With the ending just kind of like, it was just kind of rushed. I have opinions on that, so with this timestamp, I will go past the spoilers if you haven't read this or if you just don't care about me talking about this. So obviously she escapes, right? And it kind of talks about right before she escapes and then boom, she escapes. And it doesn't go into deep detail. And I don't know if this is exactly it or not. This is just my guess. I'm thinking the reason why she didn't go into deep detail about the actual escape is because she's either scared of consequences of people who helped her or maybe closing down a path if this is a more common path that hasn't been caught or completely shut down for people fleeing North Korea. So I really think that she's trying to protect other people. And that's why I think it was written with the ending like that. And me thinking about that, it's hard to be mad at somebody for just ending their story like that. And plus, like, it's her story. If she doesn't want to tell us that minute details, she does not have to. So the next is The Shadow King. I will give this a 3-star. I did listen to this on audiobook. Apparently, according to other reviews that I've read, I did not read the physical book, but apparently there was like a lot of typos, but this is a translated book, so, sometimes errors happen. But in the audiobook, I didn't really I didn't notice too many errors. So this is about like Ethiopia during the Italian invasion during World War II. Or right before World War II. It's like literally right before it. I'm not sure if Italy was still invading Ethiopia during World War II, but they definitely did before. And this is a side of history that people don't talk about. And I don't think a lot of people realize that the world wars were actually like the whole world. Like it wasn't just like Europe's war and then Japan and the United States got involved. Like a lot of Asia was getting like conquered around. Africa got affected. Like South America got affected. Canada got involved. Like it was actually like a world war. But I thought the book was okay. It had some flow issues. And I don't know if that's just from like translation or the author themselves. But I want to read more. And I thought about this when I read the book and I just haven't done it yet. I want to learn more about Africa during like World War I and World War II and the effects before and after. But I don't know much about any of the African countries in that time. So if there's any books or documentaries. So the next one would be Embers. And I give this a 5-star. This isn't a traditional book. This is like meditations, quotes, sayings, stream of consciousness, philosophy, with some gorgeous photos. And this is not a book you sit down and read in like one sitting. You want to take your time with the book because it's not meant just to like read fast and be done. You're supposed to meditate on these quotes, these sayings, this philosophy. So it is different than like the rest, but I appreciate it. There was some stuff that I kind of already thought, then there was some stuff that made me think differently and reflect on stuff in a different way. So, and the photography in that book is gorgeous as well. So if you can find it and read it, I definitely recommend it and take your time with it. So the next one is a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper. I give this a 4-star. I do wish this was more of a novella than a short story, but it's incredible for the little bit that we get. It's about a woman basically being drove insane and locked up in a room because her husband thinks that's what's best for her. And I can't really go too much more than that without just like, I guess, spoiling the whole thing. But read this and it really makes you think about things like solitary confinement. I read 4 books for this video I did, like called the books, 1900 books I read. And I want to read like a few books from different decades. And they're not like necessarily with the same genre, just, you know, kind of like reading time travel, you know. 2 of them fall into like this type of category. So I'm going to talk about them together. The video is going to be linked once again if you want more thoughts on it. But I'm not going to go as in-depth with these next 2 books. So the first one I read was A Story About My Life by Helen Keller. I'll give this a 4-star. The edition that I read, as I mentioned in that video, had letters, things that were written about her, and like just more context. So if you want to know even more about her life than just the biography she wrote, that is a great addition to have. Helen Keller, she did a lot for blind and deaf schools, and she was an activist. And like this particular biography I thought was going to be about more of her like entire life. It's more about her educational pursuits, even though it does speak on some stuff as a child and some stuff outside of schooling. Most of it has to do with her education. So the next one is The Scarlet Pimpernel. I gave this a 3-star. This is a book series. I have no desire to continue this book series, but I did think the first book was fun. It's kind of like really early chick flick in book form. Anybody can read this, but it kind of fits a lot of that stereotypes. And I don't know if this is the first time or one of the first time. I know it's one of the first times, but I don't know if it's the first time like a superhero and an identity is really used, but it definitely influenced that a lot, especially when I was doing research. I couldn't find a definite answer of which novel was first, but this seems to be more influential. So the next one is a children's book, and I was surprised on it. And it is The Secret Garden. This, I'll give it a 3-star. This has been in 2 videos. This was in the 1910s video, which I will link below, and it was in the random generator. A generator randomly picks my TBR. I'll link that one below too. This is enduring, and it's like the overall story is nice, but I can't, even though this was written back in 1911, I just can't overlook the racism and the ableism that's in this children's novel. So I think this is a nice read, but like especially with the gardening and stuff, but if you read this to kids, I think you need to be ready to have certain conversations, because the racism and the ableism is strong, and I go a lot more in depth in that in the vlog than I do like the 1910 videos. Like I definitely kind of tear that book apart. But it was like an hour-long video, not just on this book, but on 4 books, but I kind of tear that one apart a little bit. So if you want like a really in-depth look at my thoughts, definitely check out that video. So the next one I want to get to, because I talked about Helen Keller, so I kind of want to touch on the other like 1910 books. The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, I will give this a 4-star. It was a great read. It talks about identity and like race, and he's basically white passing, and he travels, he goes through life during like basically like Jim Crow and when lynchings and Europe, and comparing the two. This was also in my random generator vlog, and I go into a lot more detail. I read passages. The writing in this book is gorgeous. It makes you think a lot. It is heartbreaking, and while it is a fictional autobiography, it's definitely worth your time. This is a great classic. The next one, this one's also in 1910 and not the random generator, is My Macedonian Cousin of Long Ago. I couldn't find too much like a background on it, except for the author's like American. And this is an old children's book, but there's not much on the author or any background stuff that I could personally find. But there's like my little like Athenian cousin and stuff like that. So she did a few of these. I thought this was fun. This talks about Alexander the Great and basically being a boy going through like military school, and it was just a lot of fun. I wouldn't take this as a serious read by any means, and it's definitely like kid safe. So yeah, if you want to read this, I believe it's in public domain, but I got it off Amazon for like 99 cents. So the next one of that is The Beast in the Cave. I give this a 3-star. This is by H.P. Lovecraft. This is my first H.P. Lovecraft anything that I've read, and this is something he written when he was a teenager and it got published later. It was okay. The environment was written fine, but I just didn't care about old dude. I just didn't. It was just okay. Like, it was an okay short story. It was like, what, 7 pages? Something like that. So I don't think it's like wasting your time or anything if you read this. But I'm going to have to read something else by H.P. Lovecraft to know like if I like his stuff or not. But all his stuff is public domain now, so... And he's dead, so he gets nothing if you read his stuff. Alright, so now that we're done with the 1910 video, I'm going to go back to the next 2 books that were in Generator randomly picks my books. The next one is Little Women. I'll give this a 3-star. It was a chunky read. It was a fun read. I'll give it that. It was a fun read, and there are Christian elements in it, but it doesn't shove it down your throat. For its time that it's written, it's actually a little progressive. It's not as progressive as like what we see as progressive now, but for the time it was written, it's definitely progressive. It felt like a family sitcom written back during the Civil War times. So like, I don't think I'll ever read this again, but it was a fun read. I don't regret it. I think this could definitely fit into a lot of people's taste, and there's really nothing that bad about the book. It's just, you know, it just is what it is. And the last one I read in the Generator book is The Lakota Way. I'm going to give that a 4-star as well. And this is like a series of lessons, and then like he also gives like historical backgrounds. He gives stories from like the Lakota culture, and you can learn so much from this. Each chapter isn't necessarily just like one story. It's like a story lesson, sometimes even more stories and things to contemplate about. And there's like cultural background stuff that he'll explain from the stories. But I read this like 2 chapters a day, kind of spread out, like one in the morning and one at night, because I was doing a vlog. If I was reading this not for a video, I would have done one a day. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the audiobook is narrated by the author, so definitely check this out. Like, next one is a book that got hyped all over YouTube, and that is Breach of Peace by Daniel Green. Apparently, I'm giving everything like 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It is a novella. This is his first published book. I thought it was fun, like I did. And I'm ready to see what he writes next. I am a fan of Daniel Green, but I was kind of concerned because I've had a couple of YouTubers I've read their books that I was a fan of and didn't like their books. Sometimes you hear bad things about YouTuber books, but I just thought overall this was fun. I give it a 4 stars because I couldn't really find anything like wrong with it, but it's not like my all-star favorite either. You know, it's just, I actually bought the physical book. I don't buy too many physical books. I know he was trying to make it as cheap as possible, but I kind of wish the quality of the book itself was better. Like, I mean, it's fun and floppy, and it is a cheaper book, but I don't know, I just kind of wish the print quality was better, but I don't think that's necessarily his fault. And I know that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, I bought the physical edition of the book. The next one I want to talk about is Warbreaker, another 4-star, because that seems to be all I give. This is by Brandon Sanderson. I started reading Brandon Sanderson last year, and I have enjoyed almost everything I've read, except for like the first book of the first era of Mistborn, and I didn't care for The White Sand, and I'll talk about that later because that was this year. And this one was really good. I read this right after White Sand, which is a graphic novel, and so much better. That is not an unpopular opinion. That's probably like an opinion that like 98% of the fan base has, but I thought the way it went between like the sisters and stuff, it was really cool. I listened to it on audiobook, and I had a blast, and I've been meaning to pick up another Brandon Sanderson book because I bought some on sale and I just haven't got to them yet. So these next 3 were part of a Breath of the Wildathon, which is a Zelda readathon that I did. The other 2 that I read for out of the 5 were graphic novels, so I'll talk about them there, but that video will be linked down below too. So first one is Home by Toni Morrison, another 4-star. This was really short for Toni Morrison, but it packs a punch. It talks about PTSD, family, eugenics, racism, just, it's a lot. But it is really good. Make sure you're in a good headspace when you pick up this, but I definitely recommend that you do. Or so far, I've only read like 3 Toni Morrison books, but all 3 of them have been phenomenal. So, but make sure you're in a good headspace. And with Toni Morrison books, I will say this, you have to pay attention. This is not a book that you just kind of like lightly read, or if you listen to audiobook, make sure you actually just pay attention because you might get a little confused. The next one I read for the readathon that's on this list is Out of the Silence. I will give this a 4-star as well. This was written by one of the survivors in the it was in a plane crash, and it's from most of the plane was like a rugby team from Uruguay, and they survived for 70 something days in the mountains and the snow, and there is talk of cannibalism. This is nonfiction. They do a lot of teamwork. It's incredible, and I binged a lot of informational videos and stuff right after reading this book. So I mean, those people, man, oh man. Every time I think about that, I'm like, ooh, man. So the next one was The Trial. I'll give this one a 3-star. It was just really weird. And I mentioned this in the Zelda video as well. It is weird. It is weird. It's hard to keep up because the narrator doesn't know what's going on We don't know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on, so it's confusing. You've got to pay attention to reading this as well. From what I understand, this particular author just writes this way, where you have to actually think and like pay a lot of attention, which is nothing wrong. But I didn't know what I was getting into when I like picked up this book, and it makes you really think about don't blindly trust the system, especially the judicial system. After that, I read another Stephen King book called Needful Things. This one's a 3-star as well. And it's basically like about this little boy and this guy in the shop. And it was a fun read, but I've read better by Stephen King. And it's just like an okay book. Like, it's just an okay book. So the last like actual novel in this category that I have read is The Cruel Prince. I am behind on this series. I've heard a lot about this series, but I haven't picked it up. I avoided most spoilers. It's about fairies and stuff, and it was fun. I'll give this a 3-star as well. I have read fantasy that I've personally enjoyed more, but it ended in a way that I do want to continue on with the series. So hopefully the series, picks up and gets better and doesn't let me down. It's a trilogy, and I like the fact that the two sisters who want to stay in the fairy world go by different means to accomplish it instead of them just teaming up and doing one way. Their sister who is like half fae, her dynamic as well. I thought the premise was cool. I kind of wish this was an actual like longer book that went more in depth with things, but I enjoyed it and I'm definitely going to continue. Myself left out 2 novels, but they're like anthologies, and I guess in my brain, like, because the photos were separated, so I think I was going to do a different category, but there's 2 of them, so I'm going to go ahead and just add those in before I go to the mangas and graphic novels. A Japanese anthology written by a Greek man who was living in Japan, and he studied the stories and stuff. And this was in my 1900s video. He studied like a lot of Japanese like folklore and horror stories, ghost stories and stuff. And this is based on like kind of like the supernatural, and it's separated off by like insects, like butterflies and stuff. And talking about butterflies, he does admit that the butterfly ones probably have a Chinese origin, but they're talked about in Japan. And I thought it was fun. Like, I really enjoyed reading those stories. I read like 1 a day and it was great. So the other one was The New Daughters of Africa. I think there was an anthology just called The Daughters of Africa, but I read this one. So it separated off into like different decades and like different writers within those decades. And there's over 200 authors. Most had like essays or a short story, but there was poetry. Sometimes there was a couple of pieces by the same author. And this was on my 21 books I want to read in 2021, but because there was 200, instead of just doing like 1 author a day, I would try to always do 1 author a day, but like if I was in like the grocery store line or waiting in the car or maybe waiting on food or something, I would try to throw in a couple of extra stories a day just because this anthology is so large. I've never read this big of an anthology, but I like the thing with each author. It tells you like their background and stuff, especially like, and it gave me some authors I definitely want to check out eventually. There's some names you'll recognize, and this is free if you have Prime for Kindle Read. Like, all you have to do is download the Kindle app, and if you have Amazon Prime, you can just download it and read it, and that's how I did it. My library actually does have this book, but with how chunky this was, I like to keep a Kindle book, an audio book, and a physical book going on at like all times, right? And so this was like my Kindle book for a little while, and yeah, this is a thick one, but it's definitely worth your time. There's only like, I couldn't think of any story that I actually hated or anything, and I thoroughly enjoyed most of them. So what's cool about this is Black female authors, but there are some from Africa. There are African Americans. There's Caribbean authors. Like, it's not just like one sector of Black women. Like, it's really diverse within this group. And yeah, if you have Amazon Prime and you want to, like, anthologies are great for this because you can kind of get a taste of different authors and see who you would like to read more of. All right, so now we got those 2 done. Let's get into graphic novels and mangas. So, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I know I've done a lot of talking, so I'm just gonna say this again. I'm only gonna do 1 picture a series because I just don't feel like going through a million photos But I'm just going to kind of give like, the ratings is going to kind of be the average of what I've read versus each individual one because of the one picture rule. Shuri, the first one I read of this year, I give this a 3-star because I read like volume 1 and volume 2, and I know, especially with Western comics, the artist and the author change pretty frequently, and the art style changed hard, and that's a personal preference. And I kind of felt like I didn't like the villain that they had, but I didn't think the story was bad either. I just felt like this had a lot more potential and it didn't live up to it. I'm going to go ahead and just go straight to DC. So, Superman's Secret Identity, I gave this a 4-star. This is the first time I've really dove into Superman, and there is a video about me giving Superman a second chance, which is linked down below. Oh, and Shuri is in the January wrap-up. So, the Superman Secret Identity is kind of like an alternate universe Superman, where like Superman's like a person on TV, kind of like in our world, but for this guy, and he has an accident and gets a lot of the same powers as like Superman, but he's actually able to age and whatnot, and it's fun. And the second Superman one that I read was Superman for All Seasons, and I wasn't a fan of the artwork in this one, but I like the perspectives. Like, you know, it has the 4 seasons, and it does not go from the perspective of Clark Kent or Superman, but it goes through like Lex Luthor, Jonathan Kent, Lois Lane, and Lana Lang, and it just basically tells of like the relationship to them from like their perspective, and I kind of like that a lot. Like, I do, especially like seeing something from Jonathan Kent. Like, I don't know, I just liked it. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and go with Swamp Thing. I read the first 2 of Swamp Thing. There are 6 in Alan Moore. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 4-star as well. The interesting thing about this particular Swamp Thing is Alan Moore picked up this series. There was another author before this, but he picked up with like some issue number in the 20s. I can't remember the exact issue number, but it's in the 20s. So he quickly wraps that up and then just does his own thing. And Swamp Thing does continue after Alan Moore, but from the consensus online, Alan Moore's section of Swamp Thing is the best. And the way he writes, it feels like its own story, separate from the rest of Swamp Thing, even though it's before and after Alan Moore. I was mostly interested in this because I am a huge John Constantine fan, and John Constantine pops up in Volume 3, and that was his first debut ever. It was in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. As much as I've loved John Constantine, somehow I just haven't read his origin, because I just haven't thought much about Swamp Thing, and I got my hands on him, and it is time. It is time to read my boy's origins. And I know he pops up through the series with him randomly, and he's not going to be like a main character, but he's like a random pop-up, and I just gotta have more John Constantine. Mushishi, I've read the entire series this year. I'm going to give it a 4, even though like most of them were 4 or 5. I'm just going to do 4 because it's easy. So I read them physically from my library, and one thing I don't understand is volumes 8, 9, and 10, because there's 10 volumes, is in one big omnibus book, but you can't buy them in English as single volumes, but you can't buy 1 through 7 in omnibus edition. So I think when 7 came out, they were like, we just gotta finish like translating the rest of the series, so they just put them all in one big book because there was 3 volumes left. I think that's probably what happened, but I didn't actually look it up, so I don't know for sure. But this is kind of a slower pace, creepy manga. There is the main guy, and the story does continue, but it's not like in one place with an overarching story with a bunch of the same characters. It's just kind of like this guy who travels story. So it's kind of like not like Monster of a Week with a minor plot going through it, but something similar to that realm. I've been meaning to pick up this manga series for a long time, and I finally did, and I do not regret it. I liked season 1 of the anime when it first came out, and I believe season 2 is supposed to eventually drop, but they waited so many years in between, I don't know what happened there. I know I just did a manga. I kind of forgot about White Sand. It was a 3. I did a video on it, linked below. My opinions are, they fit probably just with the fandom. They're not, but it wasn't great for Brandon Sanderson. That's all I gotta say. It wasn't horrible, but Brandon Sanderson needs to stick to actual novels and not graphic novels. But like I said, that's not an unpopular opinion. So Blood on the Track, I will give this a 5-star. It is creepy in like a psychological. It's very creepy, but it's not like supernatural creepy or ghost creepy. Like there's a lot of mental illness spoken of. There's a lot of abuse, and everybody is interesting. And I've read everything that's out currently, and on Goodreads, I'm kind of reading by volume as like they're released. But I've read all that's out right now, which is about 10 volumes, and this is not for the faint of heart. I've read, like this is not like a super gory thing. It's just there's a lot of abuse in this, and a lot of mental illness that's explored, and the mother is creepy. So I read the first 3 volumes of My Hero Academia. It was okay. I kind of want to watch the anime instead of continuing with the manga. But I just don't have like a strong interest. Like one day I didn't really have a strong interest, and one day I was like, I'm just gonna pick this up. I'm gonna try it. Because I gave Attack on Titan a chance, and these are completely different. I know they're different, but a lot of shonen, like a lot of mangas like in that category, I just, like One Piece, Bleach, Naruto. I know they're not exactly the same, but a lot of those I don't hate them, but I'm just not a huge fan of them, and I kind of felt like those would be it, but I ended up loving Attack on Titan, which I would watch the anime. I didn't read the manga, and I decided to give My Hero Academia a chance because I didn't want to watch 2 animes at once. And I'm just like, eh. So, I read all of the Love Me For Who I Am. This is a 5-star. This is the first manga that I've read with a non-binary character, and trigger warnings for self-harm in this. So they work in a little maid cafe, and our main character was born a male, but presents very feminine, and they're still non-binary. And they're dealing with, like, romantic stuff, how people at school see them, how society sees them, how they see themselves. Even, like, the romantic interest has, like, thoughts of, like, am I gay or not? And it's interesting, like, I haven't really read anything with, like, non-binary characters in it, and so this was a nice treat, especially in manga, but even in, like, normal novels, I just haven't gotten to, like, anything with non-binary, so it was nice to see that for once, and the discussions around the different conversations that would naturally come up, and the maid cafe thing is definitely a unique way to go about it, and it is finished. It's only 5 volumes, and I definitely recommend picking this up, especially if you're into that kind of thing. So, the next one, I'm giving this like a 3-star. It's My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. This is like a memoir. And this is a different manga than you would expect. Like, it still reads like the same way, but the art style kind of feels more of like a comic strip instead of like what you traditionally think. Like, if you were going to read like Attack on Titan, Death Note, or anything, like the panels are different. There's apparently more that this author wrote, like manga-wise, about her life. I thought this was an interesting way to go about it because this particular one starts off first, and it's about her experience hiring like an escort and having her first sexual experience, and her like coming to terms with that she's a lesbian. And I'm glad I read it, but I kind of don't have interest in her other mangas. Not that I don't think they're good, and maybe I'll pick them up, like, in the future, but right now, like, that was just a self-contained story. And since the other one goes through other aspects of her life and has kind of nothing to do with this, I don't have, like, the urge to read them right now. So this last one that I left, I'm going to give it a 4-star. It is super corny, and it's really different than what I normally read, but it's called Shortcake Cake. I've read the first 5 volumes, and I've got volumes, like, I got volume 6, like, right here, and I checked out all the way through 10, and there's 12 in the series. I just haven't finished it yet. it's real corny, you know, everybody loves our main girl and they're in a boarding house because, you know, kind of like Host Club where the school's far away and stuff. And I usually don't get into mangas or animes of this nature, but I've been using this as like a palate cleanser between like heavier reads or the fantasies and stuff, and I just love it. It's so corny and I love it. Like, it's just great. Alright, so that is all that I've read of this year. I know this video is long, but I'm gonna keep going. This is basically like the list I used when I made my 21 books I want to read in 2021 thing, so I could like actually remember the order. I don't usually script my videos, but for like tags and I'm gonna do a couple more list videos, I kind of just literally write down the list, and then because I wanted to put the photo up, I had like the Goodreads right there, and since I hadn't read these, this was nice. I haven't done well. Technically, I know this is skipping from like the first one, but Arsenic and Adobo, I have not read yet. I technically checked it out on Libby, but I didn't realize I accepted it, and so it expired, but it says I'll get it any day now, so that is gonna be soon, but I thought I was gonna finish it before this video, and I did not. So I guess I shall just unhighlight that. I did not catch that before starting this. There we go. Alright, so as we talked about, I read Concrete Rose. I have read Warbreaker, New Daughters of Africa, and Ronette and Jamil. And I really liked 3 of those. So there is a semi one that I'm halfway through. And that is More to the Story. I actually just got that available on Libby. As an audiobook, it's only 4 hours, so I'll finish it sometime soon. And it's a retelling of Little Women. And I read Little Women so I could fully enjoy More to the Story. And I will link the video that I went into more depth about what the summary was for all of these. But I've only read 4 of the 21, so, or 4.5, because I had to, my personal opinion is I had to read the background before I start More to the Story. But I own The Last Train to Key West, so, and The Toll, so there's no and this close to okay. So these first 3, I have no reason for not reading them yet. I'm going to reread The Children of Blood and Bone because I have not read The Children of Virtue and Vengeance, and I just remember the baseline of Children of Blood and Bone because I read that in like years ago, so I need to reread it. The Fiery Cross, I mentioned that I read Virgins to kind of get my foot wet back in the Outlander. Promised Land, that's the Obama book. But when I read The Burning God, I will finish the Poppy War trilogy. Rent a Boyfriend, I've actually checked this out and then I got into a reading slump and then I just read a bunch of manga, so I gotta recheck that out. Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, Arsenic and Adobo, Teen Titans, Beast Boy Loves Raven, that is not out yet, so I just can't read it. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and like highlight Blood on the Tracks because I said I wanted to give the first one a chance, and I read all of it that's out. So yay, I've read 5, not 4. So yay, one more than I thought. I had the wrong thing highlighted. Rise of the Magics, that is not as high of a priority as the other ones, but I want to finish that trilogy. As I mentioned last video, I didn't know on Scrib that I read the abridged version of the first 2 books. So I haven't decided if I'm going to read the unabridged or the abridged of this one. I don't usually go for a bridge, but since I accidentally read the other 2, you get the point. Tentacle, I have that on Kindle. I just haven't read it yet. There's no reason I haven't, though. Black Sun, I'm on hold at the library. I have like a couple months on that. And We Hunt the Flame, there is a sequel for that, but I want to see if I enjoy the first book first, which makes sense. That is it on that. That was like the only real goals that I had for the year because I just don't like setting a bunch of goals. I don't like setting for a bunch of TBRs. Like I might do a soft core TBR personally for myself that most people don't see, but my mood changes a lot. And if I'm just not enjoying something or I just don't feel like reading it and I buy so few books. Like, I mean, I do have an Audible subscription, but I don't physically buy a ton of books, so a lot of it's just dependent on the library. But before I go, I am going to talk about things that are on like a more immediate TBR because they're either checked out or whatever. I'm going to continue with Blood on the Tracks. I'm going to continue with Shortcake Cake. I kind of don't like the title of this, but it's so great. I have both of my brother's husband. I got them both checked out. As I mentioned, I am going to read The Finished Swamp Thing, A Phoenix First Must Burn. Sorry, I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying that. Probably because I've been talking forever. So I got Cane by Jean Toomer. This was written during the Harlem Renaissance. And this is an edition that has like a lot of background context, like correspondence and stuff, along with the actual story. This is my next read. I'm in a Stephen King book club, so Later is on my list. I just used an Audible credit for that because that's actually like in my book club, and I didn't put it on hold in time for it not to be over 6 months. But hopefully it's good. I liked Joyland, and this is kind of in that hard case, like those hard case books that he wrote. And currently I am in the middle of Brett Givers, and I'm listening to that via audiobook as well. It's only like 7 hours, so I should get through that soon. And if you're watching this far, I don't care to go ahead and spoil a video that'll be coming up soon. But Cane and Brett Givers are part of reading books from the 1920s. And Brett Givers is about a Jewish immigrant family in Brooklyn. And I've read the other 2 books already that I didn't mention that are going to be for that. So when I finish those 2, that video should be coming out soon. I want to keep going through that's like another, like, that's a channel goal. And I guess a book goal, just to read through like decades of like, because it's going to be the 1930s, 1940s. And I haven't decided, as I mentioned, I think when I first did those videos, I don't know if I'm going to go through 1990 or I'm going to go through the 2000s, but I'm not going to worry about 2010s just because it's only 2021 and yeah, we know what books were popular and stuff, so I haven't decided, but I got several videos to worry about that. So guys, I hope you enjoy this, and if you stuck this long, I appreciate you. I try not to have super long videos like this, but a couple here and there, not so bad, not so bad. Tell me how your reading year's going, and I will see you next time.